In the earlier years of human resource development movement, and particularly the birth and the uh, spread of the national HRD network, we had many chairmen and MDs or CEOs who contributed to the growth of HRD movement. These are all the people who I think believed strongly in HRD, human resource development, as competence building, culture building, commitment building, happiness, creating happiness at work, and helping people to enjoy work, and so on. These were the people from whom we have learnt a lot. I want to mention one of them as Dr. P Gupta. He was chairman of the CMC, earlier known as Computer Maintenance Corporation of India, CMC. I think he was also Secretary Electronics, and he was one of those rare persons who had all unusual thoughts. I call him maverick of the CEOs in terms of HRD. He had a very interesting HR policy and a set of manuals. Actually, there were no policies, but I think these were all based on something like what Ricardo Sembler says, faith and trust. In one of his talks at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and where we used to invite many of the CEOs to come and address the student gatherings. And once we invited Dr. P. Gupta, and in one of the gatherings, he said that uh, he strongly believes in preaching. And he said, he tells most of the people, most of the managers, if he has to draw one lesson from life, preach even if you don't practice. And this was quite a startling kind of a remark he made in his lecture. And when he said, preach even if you don't practice, we were quite startled. And then later, both Dr. Uday Parikh and I met him and asked him that, Dr. Gupta, I think we all say practice before we preach. You should practice before you preach. And you're telling us, preach even if you don't practice. Now, this is simply contradictory to what we have heard of. Now, can you please uh, tell us a little more about why do you feel so? He said something very interesting. He said that Professor Rao, if you have to preach something, you should have something to preach. If you have nothing to preach, you can't preach. Most Indians have nothing to preach, and therefore they are not in a position to preach. And I am suggesting to them, first you acquire something. It may be a simple thing, it may be a great vision, it may be an ordinary thing, maybe a new practice, new way of doing things, new experiment you want to run, a new approach, or something like that. So you should first acquire a competence to be able to preach. You should certainly have a communication competence, but you should have something to preach if you have to preach. So when I say preach even if you don't practice, I am appealing to Indian managers, learn, learn something. You have something which you can preach. So this is something, first point. Number two, if somebody learns something and he has a point of view, he has something to preach, he will start preaching. And when he starts preaching, after some time, he may believe in what he is preaching, because he began by preaching only from somebody else's point of view, something which he has learned, he has probably not taken to his heart. Now that he is preaching, he, with repeated preachings, will start believe in whatever he is preaching. So you get internalized. Suppose you continue to preach, and if you preach that point of view that you have, or a particular thing which you want people to practice, after some time, even if you are not practicing, people start asking you, are you practicing what you are preaching us? That is the beginning of real change. When people ask you, are you practicing what you preach, then you start really saying that I must practice also, and you will start practicing, and the change takes place. So Professor Rao, I am preaching to preach even if you don't practice, so that people will learn something and will have something to preach. And what a beautiful answer he has given. He, all that I think, to me it means is that you will have to learn, you should have something to preach. And unless you have something to preach, you can't be a good teacher, and you can't be a good leader and so on. This is sometime in mid 80s, 85, 86, 87. I think when we used to interact with Dr. P. Gupta. About 10 years later, most of you would have seen this wonderful book by Noel Tichy of University of Michigan on leadership engine. And not only on leadership engine, Noel Tichy has written a lot about leadership. And the main thesis of Noel Tichy is that good leaders are good teachers, and good teachers have a point of view. And he says, if you have a point of view, you should learn to teach it. And when you teach whatever is your point of view, you are already a leader. And he says that you cannot be a leader unless you are a teacher. Good leaders are good teachers. What a beautiful research finding that Noel Tichy has talked of. And this is the way I think he promoted quite a bit of this in GE and made many CEOs successful. And remember, almost 2 decades prior to Noel Tichy's scientific work and literature on leadership engine, we had CEOs like Dr. P. Gupta who said more or less the same kind of a thing. So, my friends, there is a lot to learn from some of our old CEOs, who some of them are no more, some of them are still living, but their experiences are wonderful experiences. They teach us a hell of a lot. Next time, when you meet a senior manager, a senior citizen, or a CEO, do try to make it a point to extract from that particular person whatever are his or her life's lessons. These seniors have phenomenal amount of insights into life. I wish you all the best on this Teachers' Day. Happy Teachers' Day, happy learning, and happy discussion.